Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about courtly love and Gawain's virtue, and at the end of part three, we have this new kind of challenge, this new kind of game with the hunting game or the hunting exchange. And when looking at part three, it's impossible to ignore the structuring of the 3 days of events and parallel the drama both indoors and outdoors. So we have the Lord who hunts outdoors, and inside of the castle, Gawain is, for lack of a better phrase, being hunted by this incredibly beautiful, sensual woman. And remember the in part two, we were introduced to these two very different women, one old crone, and this other very beautiful woman who rivals Guinevere's beauty. And that's the lady of the house, the wife of the Baron, Lord Berkelak. And of course, we don't know his name yet, but that's who she is. So she is the one that's doing the hunting of Gawain. And at the end of these kind of two separate and very different hunts, they are brought together by the exchange of winnings between Gawain and the Lord. This very masculine pursuit of animals is equated to the lady's very feminine sexual pursuit of our chivalrous hero Gawain. And I think that through this kind of parallel structure, the poet really deconstructs further these superficial social conventions that have been subtly questioned throughout the poem. These interactions that Gawain has while the Lord is out hunting can kind of be summed up essentially as the lady, for the most part, pursues Gawain by using these complex flirtations and social conventions of courtly love that recall his sense of duty to a noble lady. Yet she is banking on a very basic human instinct, which is lust. I mean, who can resist all of this temptation? And their dialogue is complex. It draws upon these attitudes of courtesy and humility. Yet what it all comes down to is something very primal, very, in a sense, uncivil and animalistic. And then again, we get a sense of the falseness of these social constructions, as with the descriptions of these luxurious clothes and architecture and the very careful diplomatic dialogue between Gawain and the lady. And ultimately, they are used to mask the real human nature of lust as another example of this kind of social artifice that's imposing itself falsely on nature. And interestingly enough, that Gawain is able to use his sense of civility to kind of fend off these dangers of lust and temptation. And it's only through his diplomatic responses and reference to social rules, like her existing marriage to the Lord and his refusal use of force, that he's able to extricate himself from this very complicated situation. And this is really a moral dilemma that we see Gawain in, because if he rejects the lady's requests, he runs the risks of offending a moral code which, until this very moment, has never really posed a problem to him. His chivalric duty has always required servants and deference to both one's lord and one's lady, but only now does Gawain's fervent belief in chivalry create this kind of conundrum for him. And on one hand, he is tempted to give in to the lady's advances by his own human nature and by her appeal to his sense of chivalry to a noble lady. And on the other hand, he counters this with his sense of duty that he's sworn an oath to the Lord and his strong Christian belief. And the danger really is that he is being watched. He's being watched by us. He's being watched by the Lord. He's being watched by the lady. And he appeals to his sense of moral duty and his Christian values to kind of get him out of this unscathed. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is a very complicated scene, and they really challenge Gawain in a way that he's never been challenged before. Each time he is tempted by the lady of the house, we have this kind of back and forth between lust and love, duty and honor, and this kind of Christian sense of duty. So I want to go through very briefly because I can't spend too much time, otherwise we'll be here all day. So looking at day 1, we have the hunting of the deer outside of the house. And as this kind of depiction of the Lord hunting with these deers in the dales quivering with dread, what is Gawain doing inside? Well, he's sleeping. It's this very, to point this out, he's sleeping in a bed naked, which is a very, when you sleep, when you are without clothing, when you are without armor, you are in a very vulnerable position. And that's what Gawain is in here. And there's this real kind of subversion of gender roles here, where the Lord is out hunting and Gawain is being hunted. He's inside the house like a woman would be. He's being kind of hit on by this woman like a woman would be. So anyways, he notices as he's sleeping the lady enter his room, and his first instinct is to pretend to be asleep. And he's like, no, if I just lay here long enough, she'll go away. But that doesn't really work, as he's, maybe I better ask her. Maybe I better be direct and see what she wants. And he crosses himself. Note that he needs this kind of almighty divine protection and this kind of nod to Christianity before they have this conversation. And like the deer, the lady says that she has tricked and trapped Gawain, and notice that she won't let him get dressed, and instead she kind of tucks him in to the bed sheets. So we have this naked Gawain in bed with a beautiful lady who we know he finds attractive. And basically they have this exchange that the gist of it becomes this. She flatters him. You're Gawain, whose reputation is known far and wide. I'm here. You're my husband. I'm here. You're here. My husband's away. I have in my house the woman every man. I have in my house the man every woman wants. And thank the Lord, if I can commit adultery, I can commit adultery with you. And Gawain says, no, I'm not that Gawain. You misunderstand. But he says, do with me as you please. He responds in virtuous speech. And I think the question is, why does he entertain this? Why does he let himself be in this kind of trap? And the answer to that question is, what can he not do? According to chivalry and courtly love, he can't refuse her, because by refusing her, he is violating this oath of loyalty that he's made to the Lord of the castle. So he can't be like, get away from me, you hussy. because it violates those codes. So he has to reject her without really rejecting her. He throws out the name of Mary, this reminder of virginity. He declares himself her knight, and then she turns the tables and says, well, no, you can't be Gawain. She essentially offends him, and she says Gawain couldn't spend so much time with a woman in a locked bedroom and not ask for a kiss. And so he agrees to this courteously, and she gives him a kiss. Meanwhile, back in the forest, the deer is dead, and we have this long, violent description of it being gutted. And the Lord brings back this venison and tells Gawain to take what he wants. And true to the terms of their agreement, Gawain repays the Lord and lays a big old fat one on the he gives a kiss to the Lord. And there is we have this honoring of the exchange. And then again on day 2, we have this hunting for boar. The Lord goes out and he hunts for boar. And what's different between a boar and a deer? Well, a boar, it can kill you. It's more dangerous. These suckers are, 6 feet tall with tusks, and they charge. They are violent, and there's tons of stories in medieval literature that talk about hunting accidents. So there's this violent animal that's being hunted, and then meanwhile, back in Gawain's chamber, he wakes up in a bad mood. The lady kind of mollifies this. There's more of the same from the first day, and she says that he's forgotten his lessons from the day before, and she asks, where's her kiss? And Gawain says, I'm afraid I didn't ask for a kiss because I was afraid I'd be refused. And she flatters him and says, no one would refuse you. And then they talk about this concept of rape, which again is this very violent act that's akin to the very violent animal. And hold on, I lost my place in my notes. She says that Gawain could never be refused, and even if he were, he's so strong that he could take what he wants. And Gawain quickly replies that such heavy-handedness is frowned on in his homeland. And finally, she gives him the kiss that she commands, and courteously supplies it. And they talk of love, its grief, and its grace. And basically, we have this kind of kinship between these two ideas. And then the lady has a request. She says, teach me about love. Tell me a story about love. This kind of, essentially all of these stories, and this is not me going off on a tangent, I promise, all of these stories of courtly love and it all ends negatively. And Gawain's she says, you are Gawain. Everybody knows who you are. She mentions his reputation again. And she says, if anybody can teach me about love, you can. And Gawain says, oh, no, I'm no expert. You are. So without kind of calling her this kind of hussy, he kind of does. And he says, you know more than I do. And he mentions Mary, and I want you guys to think back to the image inside his shield. He's devoted to her. He's devoted to virginity. And he says that to her, and he says, but because you request it, I'll try, and re-emphasizes his dedication to the lady and prays for preservation as he carries out her desire. And basically he needs this kind of intervention so she won't break his oath. So he won't break his oath to the Lord, the lady of the Lord of the manor, the lady of the manor, or to King Arthur. And she continues to tempt him for whatever her intentions and purpose may be. And we can assume at this point that her purpose is basically to get him to sleep with her. But it goes beyond that, as we find out. Her purpose is to get him to fall, to sin, and to prove his imperfection, his lack of virtue. But Gawain remains virtuous. She kisses him, and he leaves to go to mass. The Lord comes back with a boar, and Gawain exchanges the kisses. And at the end of day 2, after we have this exchange, he's true to his word, he's true to his oath. Gawain requests that he be able to leave. He has to go and meet the Green Knight. And in line 1670, the Gawain has to leave, and the Lord says, "No, but I do promise that you'll get to the Green Chapel if on time if you stay one more day. You have been tested. That the Green the Lord of the manor, Lord Berkelak, has tested him twice and found him truthful. But tomorrow, I'm going to throw out my best one yet." So essentially, the third time is a charm. And this word tested should be a clue to Gawain that something else is going on. He is indeed he's having his mettle, his mettle, mettle, tested. His moral fortitude, not his physical, is being tried. So at the end of day 2, Gawain agrees to stay another day. And day 3, after hunting, Bambi and hunting this big dangerous boar, the third day, the Lord is hunting fox. And they are not mean, they are not vicious, they might have teeth that can bite, but the implication here with the fact that he is hunting foxes is that they are smart, they are sneaky, they are sly, they are crafty, they're cunning, they are deceitful, they are deceptive. And that kind of sets the tone for Gawain's behavior in the day's exchange. The lady, it says that she doesn't sleep, and she makes herself the most beautiful with gems all in her hair, and essentially everywhere else she is naked. Gawain has trouble sleeping with dreams of the Green Knight, but he sees the lady and becomes happier. They talk, and it gets heated. Passions are flaring. And it's only through the prayers to Mary that we get this indication that Mary minds the night through. Because we have this woman lying naked next to him, and he is able to kind of abstain. And then she uses her manipulation, her cunning, to say that she feels rejected. Why won't you sleep with me? You can't be the Gawain I've heard of. And she accuses him of having a mistress. And this here, people, is his out. He could say, yes, I've got somebody back in Camelot. She's waiting for me. I love her. And he doesn't take it because she says, tell me the truth. Do you have a mistress? And there it is. He cannot lie. He has to be truthful. And he admits that he doesn't have he doesn't love anyone else. And then they get onto this conversation about her asking for a present, a ring, a token. And he says, I have nothing of value to give you. And this kind of shows Gawain's smoothness. He's suave because I'm sure he's probably got stuff all over the place that he can give this woman as a token, but he refuses. And then subsequently she says, well, let me offer you something. And she offers him this beautiful gold and red ring. And he says, no, I can't accept it because I have nothing to give you. And so he's following the rules of exchange. And then she says, well, if that's too great, if that's too grand, I'm going to offer you my girdle. And this is not the kind of girdle that Granny wears to, make all of her lines smooth and shapely. A girdle essentially is a sash that is worn around the waist. And this sash, enter foreshadow, is green and gold. And he refuses the sash once, or the girdle once, and then she says, well, you might think that it's too slight to accept, but the power is in its embroidering. It is a powerful sash. As long as someone wears it, that person is immortal. And this is a godsend to Gawain. This plays to his selfish desire for preservation, and he takes it. And the only caveat on him taking it is that he has to promise not to tell her husband, and he can't break that oath. The interesting, I'll come back to that in just a second. And then after he takes the sash, she kisses him and he leaves. He goes to church because he has a lot to pray for. He sees a priest, he confesses, he asks for absolution. And this is significant because he thinks that he's going to the Green Knight the next day and he has to get his affairs in order spiritually, because he thinks there's that impending doom, that something bad is going to happen. He's going to lose his head. So we get, he comes back after Mass. The Lord presents him the foxes. Gawain gives him a kiss, and he keeps the girdle. And I want to circle back to the girdle and his acceptance of it, and his withholding it. So the acceptance of the girdle may at the time seem small, but it has huge consequences by the end of the poem. And by secretly accepting the girdle and refusing to give it away, Gawain violates the agreement he had with his lord, thereby violating the codes of chivalry, the codes of honor that bind such contracts. It is not nearly as great a violation as adultery would have been, but it nevertheless shatters the code of chivalry which Gawain lives by. And where the lady fails to seduce Gawain by appealing to his desire for sex, she does succeed. She can appeal to his desire to live. I mean, both of these desires, the lust and the desire to live, are basic animal instincts. And while Gawain can smother the one through his strong moral sense of duty, he cannot ultimately ignore the other. The fear of death hangs too much on him. And in this way, the idealistic Gawain, the perfect Gawain, the virtuous Gawain, finally allows himself to be guided by his own nature and not by his sense of societal duty. So in a sense, Gawain is giving in to human nature, sin. This is his failure, right? So Gawain's fear of mortality, is obviously linked to his impending meeting with the Green Knight. And this is where the poet masterfully connects the story about Gawain in the castle with the larger framework of the first, more imposing story about Gawain and the Green Knight. The poet carefully cross-cuts between outdoors and indoor hunting scenes to equate Gawain with the hunted beast, that both are pursued, both are gripped by the fear of death. And the overall effect of these parallels is to equate the two scenes of the exposed, dangerous exterior of the forest and the sheltered, safe interior bedroom. So we've got this kind of blending of the inside and the outside, nature and society. And really, the poet reduces the complicated, artificialized world of human society to the basic primeval world of nature and shows that the codes of society, the codes of chivalry, the codes of courtly love are merely a pretense that cannot always be upheld. These ultimately collapse. So I will pick up, oops, I will pick up with our final part, part 4, in just a moment. So take a minute to digest what we've just read. We know that Gawain is on his way to the Green Chapel to meet the Green Knight. But in his hand, he has what he hopes is this protective girdle.